let me talk to you through a vision that I think makes sense. And my vision in that moment was like every piece of content will be very uniquely personalized for every user in the future. With AI stepping in, it's not going to be personalization by product and user attributes. It's going to be truly personalized. Every user will see a completely different version of content, and we can make that possible. It's time for us to get into that. If I were to sort of roll back and say what is my advice, I would say there's three things. Be knowledgeable about your space. This is where the founder fit comes into. Like, go into it knowing the space, knowing what you're going to work on. Be bold, have a vision that is scary and maybe creepy, but true, right? Like, be bold with that vision.
Hi everyone, welcome to AI Product Builders. Today on AI Product Builders, we are thrilled to have Neha Mittal, CEO and co-founder of Just Words, a platform helping companies boost growth by picking the best product copy using AI. Neha's unique experience comes from leading product teams at Pinterest, Twitter, to innovating at the intersection of AI and growth. She brings a wealth of knowledge on harnessing AI to elevate product messaging. So join us as we uncover the power of AI in crafting copy and that captivates and converts. Neha, welcome to AI Product Builders. It's very exciting to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, Neha. So let's start with your brief introduction about yourself and Just Words.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm building Just Words right now, where the idea is that to help companies boost growth by helping them pick the best product copy using AI. The roots of this started at Twitter long back, and then we started seeing patterns in other social media companies like Pinterest and Reddit, and that's when we started to see if this is something we can bring to the entire industry. Yeah, I could share a little bit of an intro
Yeah.
on myself as well. So before Just Words, I was leading growth teams in Pinterest and Twitter, where I was running teams focused on notifications, paid marketing,
Yeah.
and internationalization. Prior to that, I co-founded City Structure, and I was the founding engineer for SensorFlow. And before that, I was an engineer in Goldman Sachs, where I was building large distributed systems. Helped me sort of ground my space in understanding what are the engineering challenges, which I can apply to growth.
Yes.
Yeah.
What exact problems did you see at Pinterest or Twitter regarding growth, and how did this shape your experience in building Just Words?
Yeah, there's a few flavors to it, right? I think it starts with organizational frustration of doing small things and seeing velocity in it. So for example, when you think copy, right, it's such a small change. You're moving words around. But the frustration was that making every change happen would take us months. It would take
Yes.
us months to have a copywriter write something and then review it with various teams and then finally run tests on it. Results, then that's a waste. Then let's try that again, quarter over quarter. So what we started to see was it became a philosophical question if we want to even try copy testing versus not, rather than a decision rooted in data, because we had to put a lot of effort in it. So that was one starting point. The other thing which you might see in like other areas too, not just copy, is the fragmented knowledge sharing. So what would happen is you would run an experiment and then you would have like your Google Docs or Excel sheets or Slack conversations or even like emails saying this is what we noticed and here's our hypothesis, and it would end there.
Yes.
And with that, what would happen is now there's no systematic way of thinking through how are we running both experimentations as well as building, and how do we fine tune our future iterations based on those learnings. And that became a pain point. I guess the sort of tipping point was when we started to see internal tools built or even like vision docs that are talking about, oh, let's fix this problem. And then you're like, all right, like the moment you're seeing engineers leave what they're doing and starting to build tooling to solve this was like a moment for us to know, okay, this is something we want to build.
Got it. So, like, what are the unique challenges in iterating the short form content like emails, SMS, or SEO keywords, and how does Just Words specifically address these?
Yeah. It starts with the very first step is all of this short form content is literally stored as strings in code.
Yeah.
So what this means is that an engineer now has to go and change the string. Sometimes they have to go and change the bucketing logic and say like, all right, if it's these users, show them copy A versus show them copy B. Now that's not a hard engineering challenge, but to do that, you make that change and then you redeploy your app and then you monitor and test it. Then you coordinate with people roadmap project for you. And that means this is not only a challenge for engineers. Now PMs have to justify prioritizing that project, right? So now it becomes this big thing that even as a product manager, I would think twice before putting it on somebody's roadmap. So that's like the number one challenge. The second thing that happens with short form content is it either works or it doesn't. Now, if it works for you, for
Yes.
example, at Twitter, you might have seen this on our website. We changed this notification from, I don't know, Neha just tweeted to something else, and it showed us like 800 gains. That is great. That is a great way to invest in that. However, if you did the same thing and it didn't work for your company, your insight would be this is just a cop out and we should focus on bigger growth problems, right? Because it's not showing those results. Our opinion is that there is no if or not. The only way to find out if this works is if you can maximize those iterations. Like, can you bring velocity in testing those so you know what's truly working for you or not? Otherwise, you're stuck in this brute force methodology where you're like, maybe it works, maybe we got lucky, maybe it's novelty effects and it's not going to work long term. So that's sort of the second challenge on coming up with the copy and figuring out what works versus not for your product. It's not something that AI would solve it. It's not something that we would solve it. The only way, there's no true shortcut to it. The only way we can help you expedite is by making that process faster for you.
So you touched upon velocity. Like, as a user, how many variants can I test at once?
Great question. Two parts to it. One, you can test a lot of variants in one experiment, what we call bandit models. So the way that works is it looks at exploration versus exploitation of various copies. So let's say you take copies that you want to test. It will start by exploring all of those copies, and then it will start to see how each copy is performing based on, let's say, your open rates, conversion metrics, and so on. And it would start to converge on the copy that works best for you. So that model sort of provides you a real-time way of figuring out what is the best copy in the shortest amount of time. And you can play with multiple copies. There's no limit. However, the limit comes in a few caveats to it, right? The first caveat is you test with. Now your users are subjected to all of those copies.
Yes.
That means if you have, let's say, 7 bad copies and 2 great copies, now n number of your users are seeing those 7 bad copies. And now you've diluted your impact in terms of DAU or whatever user growth number you're testing for.
Got it.
Yeah. And then that's one reason. The other reason is it'll take longer to converge. Now, if you're trying to test a lot more copies, your model will take a longer time to converge on it. So that's like real-time optimization. Of course, you can do sequential optimization where you're saying, all right, I'm just going to test A to N testing. So A, and then let's say 3 different copies that I would test in the same experiment. That's sort of more definite in that you know what's working, what's not. A bit more time, but it gives you more learnings. You know exactly what worked and what didn't. And you can use those learnings to affect the next experiment.
Can you explain the approach following behind the copy optimization? Like, what drives the decision to choose the best performing coffee across many variants?
In terms of how do we decide what's working
Yes.
the best? Yeah. So a few things. The key metric that anybody or like any company would look at is they would look at a trade-off of what is their leading indicators. So these are typically your DAU or MAU, right? User growth. Then there's the direct metric. For example, if you're looking at notifications, you would look at open rates, like how many people open the notification. You would also trade it off with things like unsubscribes and opt-outs. So you'd see like, okay, but so many people have unsubscribed because they hate this notification.
Yeah.
You want to look at that trade-off, which is usually metrics defined by the companies that we would feed in to the model to decide, okay, which metric is doing better overall, not just in terms of opens, but in terms of open rates versus unsubscribes, for example. So that's the metrics that go into it. However, that's only the quantitative side of it. There's a whole qualitative side of it, right? Like where you want to come up with the hypothesis on what is truly working for your users. And the way we like to think about it is this is where the assistive AI comes in. So what we do is we say, all right, here's what the numbers are showing us. Here's what we think copies are working for you in this way versus not. We would like you to take those inferences with your own hypothesis too, because you are the product manager or engineer or growth lead. Understands your product better than anybody else. Review those and feed those back into our models. And then we can give you something even more meaningful for the next iteration.
So do you also help companies generate these copies or just choosing the best copy?
Yeah, we help generation. So generation is literally the second part for it, right? Like once we pick the best copies, we also look at inferences, and inferences could be anything like, hey, personalization with first name works better. Hey, like consistency works better. Do like all of those inferences, and then we add them back to the model to then generate the next version of copies.
So your platform did mention about templates. These inferences come from these templates?
Yeah, so templates, there's like 3 things that go into those templates. The first one is industry insights. So we look at all of the industry data, for example, all the emails and notifications out there, and we say, all right, here's what works better versus not. It also, thanks to work, like we worked in this space for a long time, so we can what's a good email versus not. So we feed all that information in the template.
Got it.
The second thing we do is, as we talk to more content designers, right, they want to scale themselves too. Like they want to say, hey, we understand what works for this company, but we cannot go and fix every single product copy in this company. We are one content designer for like 10 teams, right? So they want to scale themselves and they want to feed all of this information in the templates that we are building. And we give them that platform to go and feed. And the last one, like you said, is literally the inferences, the data that we're getting. We use those to then feed back into the templates.
Got it. So A/B testing usually works best with websites with high traffic. Like, what is the minimum traffic you're currently looking at?
Yeah. So typically, if the traffic is above 10K users, that is wonderful, but we can get a quick A/B test running. If your traffic is lower than that, we opened up our pilots today for traffic as little as two users every month. That still gives us a path forward. It just means we would have to run the experiments for a long time because we'd have to wait until we have power in the experiment to see those results and enough traffic, or we divert more traffic to experiments. So typically in large companies, you will only have 1% of the traffic seeing treatment or seeing a different copy. What we would do is we would divert as much as 40% of the traffic to the test variant.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So, stepping back, understanding about the market, right? Regarding the copy optimization as well, with the current massive appetite to use GenAI products, the A/B testing space seems to be getting crowded. In what way do you see JustWords standing up?
Yeah, the things that I've seen in A/B test world are there's either platforms like StatSig and Optimizely. Those are standalone platforms that give you full control on how to run A/B tests. Or you would see things like Customer, which are more marketing tools. These are customer engagement platforms where you can go and set up your campaign and then start to run A/B tests. There's some new companies coming out in this space like Mutiny and CoFrame that are looking at how do you optimize web pages. Those are the three segments I see in A/B testing. Stuff they are not doing that sort of we are getting into is we're starting to look at how do we integrate with core systems like experimentation platforms of different companies, so we can not only test web pages which are very much logged out pages. That means you can throw in JavaScript and it works. What we're trying to look at is how do we provide low latency solutions for things like notifications that are really part of your product. They're not just a website web page that is not really dealing with logged in users. So that is one part of it. And then there's other aspects of it. For example, inferential learning. Like we haven't seen products where they've used systematic ways to quickly learn what they're getting from previous experiments and then feed it back to the next model. That's not something that A/B test platforms are doing today. That is not today. And that goes to the second point where it's like the only way you can make inferential learnings happen is if you can abstract out copy from code. It needs to be almost a copy repository of its own where you can see versioning of copy, you can see metadata, what products are using this copy. That's when you can truly abstract all these learnings and start to make sense of them.
Your platform also mentions the integration of dynamic personalized attributes with static copy variants. Like, what kind of specific customer attributes are you taking into account for personalization? Like, is it hard to do that today?
Yeah. So there's three different axes, I would say. One is user attributes, second one is platform attributes, and third one is product attributes. I'll a bit on each one. So user attributes are things like your topical interests. Which location are you coming from? What is your traffic source? What did you search for when you were coming to the website, right? And many other things like your demographics and your tastes and so on. Then there's platform attributes, things like what should you see if you're seeing something on Android versus iOS or on the web, right? Like, should it look the same? Should it be the same length? Should it be truncated? Like, how should that feel and look? And that's not just about how the text should look. It's also about what's your expectation from it. When you're reading an email, you are okay to get a longer email because that is your expectation. But if you're seeing a push notification, it better be very slick and ready to be digested in that second, right? And the last bit is product. So product attributes are things like, okay, I want to give you the same message that, hey, try out this new feature on my product. How that looks in a notification is going to be very different from how it looks on a prompt in an app. And it is going to be very different in terms of how it looks on a Google search. Again, because it matters, like the context matters in terms of when users are seeing it and how they are absorbing it from the product. That's the third aspect that we take in and sort of build a context around what copy makes sense for your product.
Stepping back again, talking about your experience in building Just Words, I want to understand how your feedback loop works with continuous iteration. Like, what role does user feedback play in continuous improvements of Just Words? Like, how do you incorporate this feedback into your AI models and overall service?
Yeah. In fact, that's sort of the coolest part of the product.
Yes.
And it starts with sort of the first step for it is as you run experiments, you would create data in terms of
Yes.
what are the inferences. What we do is we connect directly with your experimentation platform. That means with a click of a button, you've started an experiment. It's generating data. We take both that time series data and the final results, and we start to use those to drive inferences on the copy. That means based on, let's say, your bounce rate versus your DAU, we would say, all right, this copy is doing better than this because copy A has, I don't know, the word discover in it, and that's working better than the other two, right? And over time, we start to build inferences based on those, right? Because that's just one experiment. Now, if we have 10 of those where we try to either switch platform or the type of users or the type of copies, now we have a very complex pattern that you cannot process with just one experiment. You have to have a history of those patterns and results to be able to say, okay, here's an insight that is truly unique to my company. It's not something that GPT would provide you. Right?
Yes.
It would be something that you are building the muscle for and developing over time. And that's sort of how that model takes the data and the copy iterations, puts them, sort of blends them together and brings you the final results.
One question I want to ask you is about your product manager journey. You were a founder before and then product manager, now founder again. But what are the transferable skills from product manager to being a founder?
Yeah, in fact, I was thinking about it 2 days ago, and I was trying to write notes because I was thinking I should probably write another blog post on it. I think okay, let me think through this. But the first one that comes to mind is asking really good questions. And it's not just asking really good questions in a meeting or whatnot. It's about, can you critically analyze every single moment in your startup journey? For example, are we selling it to the right companies? As companies say this is a problem, is this a true problem? Why is this a true problem? Can we ask 5 different whys before we get to the gist of the true problem, right? And that's true. I remember that was so true of product management too. Launching, it was more about critiquing and asking lots of smart questions to get exactly what to build for customers. And that leads to the second thing, which is I think in startups, I see customer centricity more than ever. In large companies, it's so easy to have researchers and content designers and whatnot to help you through it, right? And you're getting all that processed information. You don't have any of that in a startup. That means you better get down to it yourself, and you're doing everything from sales to discovery to customer analysis. And both, like, that's a great way to build those product skills for yourself. Like, I feel I'd be a better product manager after this experience because I went down into doing things by myself. Used to, like, sure, like you do that all the time as PMs, but in larger companies, as you grow further, you start to get away from it. So just coming back to it is like, I think it's super powerful and both a very transferable skill. Yeah, and I guess the last one that I am having, like, I'm doing a lot more than ever is like prioritizing 15 different things and seeing what I want to do in one day, right? Like in this journey, it's like, I am the salesperson, I'm the product manager, I'm also doing content writing, I'm also doing marketing, whatever, right? I'm also doing admin, legal, HR. And it's like, okay, I only have so many hours. How am I going to prioritize what's truly important? And by the way, that doesn't just apply to startups. You're also thinking of your mental health and personal life. Don't go away. So how are you doing all of that now in a very short amount of time? And you have to make this work. So that, I think that muscle is again something that gets trained so well in this journey that directly applies back to product management.
Yes, and congratulations on being part of YC20. The question I want to ask about this is, what targeted advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs looking to apply and get accepted in YC? Like, are there any specific elements, especially in the application or the pitch process, that you believe are, vital for standing out?
Yeah, maybe I can share my story here. We applied to YC with an idea, and went into the interview trying to sell that idea, how like that's going to be great and like will change the world. And the first 10 minutes were probably the worst minutes of that interview because they didn't, what I'm getting to is like, they know that you're not killing it on day one. they know you're not here to crush it, because if you were, you wouldn't even go through any of this, right?
Yes.
And startups are hard. Like, the whole point is to struggle before you see light, right? The point where it started to get real and genuine is when I actually personally thought in that interview that, never mind, this is not going anywhere. Let me just be very genuine and honest about what I understand and what I'm thinking this would be.
Yeah.
And so I left all of that, like, stress and the terror of, oh my God, like, need to get into VC, whatnot. I left that aside and I was just like, all right, let me brainstorm with you. What are the growth problems I'm seeing in this company? And let me talk to you through a vision that I think makes sense. And my vision in that moment was like, every piece of content will be very uniquely personalized for every user in the future. With AI stepping in, it's not going to be personalization by product and user attributes. It's going to be truly personalized. Every user will see a completely different version of content, and we can make that possible. It's time for us to get into that. And then it started to make sense. So, like, if I were to sort of roll back and say, what is my advice? I would say there's three things. Be knowledgeable about your space. This is where the founder fit comes into. Like, go into it knowing the space, knowing what you're going to work on. Be bold, have a vision that is scary and maybe creepy, but true, right? Like, be bold with that vision. And third, very important thing that I see values and we see that every day, is be honest. Like, be honest to yourself at least. That's so important. If you're not honest every single day, you will just take a much longer time to fail, and that's not going to do good to anybody. So yeah, being honest is something that I've seen all the way from the application till today.
Yeah, thank you so much on that. I think that's it for today. Thank you for sharing a lot of insights about Just Words. And I truly believe that products like Just Words are vital for any companies to boost their growth.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It was great.
Yeah.